the most mysterious corner of the Persian Gulf. Let's start this journey with a simple question. Have you ever wondered why some countries are talking about literally on every corner, but as if they had forgotten about others? Here Oman is one of such quiet and surprisingly underestimated corners of the planet. On the map it is easy to confuse with neighbors, but if you pick up the camera, a backpack, and a drop of curiosity, Oman begins to play with completely different colors. I was not there by chance. A friend who traveled half the world told me, if I want new impressions that are not like neighboring popular directions, go to Oman. Amazingly, many will not even be able to immediately tell what is there, except for deserts and sea. Meanwhile, Oman is a real cultural pearl that slipped away from the attention of most tourists. The first sensation is silence, a special atmosphere of calm and Eastern greatness. But not sterile, as in polished megacities, but with a living history and a real soul of Arab culture. There are no heights fixed in the sky, as in the neighboring capitals, and instead, snow-white minarets and narrow old streets are greeted from the hills, which you can wander all day, distracting each aroma of spices and every look of passers-by. Oman is not an upstart among their neighbors. This is a country with a rich history, where each building seems to whisper ancient legends about navigators and caravans, crossing the sands for centuries. At the same time, it is unusually clean here. Even the metro stations are like small museums, and any tourist will feel the most comfortable and safe here as possible. Personally, I was surprised that in Oman you will not meet crowds of tourists with giant cameras and familiar vanity. There are no famous brands and obsessive Hyatts for the whole world, but behind every turn you will find a real discovery, either an unexpected ancient tower on the road, then the smell of jasmine in the evenings, then a sunset that seemed to be specially arranged only for you. Oman seemed to deliberately remain in the shadow of his name, giving a chance to the most inquisitive to discover his secrets the very first. Agree, this is much more interesting than walking along previously known routes surrounded by thousands of the same travelers. In the following chapters, we will analyze in detail why this mysterious country is still hiding behind the screen of silence, and what you need to know in order to become one of those who first tell the whole world, I was in Oman, and it was unforgettable. The image of the country, luxury, or emptiness. Every time I mentioned Oman in conversations with friends from different countries, I received the same question, what to watch there? People who have repeatedly visited the most fashionable corners of the Persian Gulf seem to know everything: Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Qatar. These are associations with skyscrapers, chic resorts, and a million entertainment. But about Oman I often heard confused silence or surprise. Is there really something worthy of attention? In part, this effect is created by the very reputation of the Oman, which has developed from disparate facts and the complete lack of aggressive advertising. There is a persistent opinion that in Oman there is a continuous desert, and there is nothing to do. In fact, this is far from reality. The country slowly built its journey without ostentatious brilliance and projects for the sake of records, so billions of fountains and towers directed into the clouds are not found here. But Oman retained his authenticity, and this is his special charm. When I first flew to the Muscat, the capital of the country, before my eyes, instead of glass giants, a cozy, almost chamber city arose, where white buildings in a traditional style seemed to be specially folded into a harmonious pattern. Only the calls of the muezzins and the rustle of waves are heard here, and not the noise of construction or advertising. The city looks like a real revitalized past, where modernity penetrated carefully, without destroying an ancient character. Please note that the state does not seek to overtake the neighbors into luxury. Oman developed his tourist sphere under the slogan high quality, not for showing. Hotels and resorts here are really high level, but they do not impose glamour, but immerse the peaceful atmosphere of peace and coziness. Many travelers note that they feel at home here, especially lovers of secluded places who are tired of pose in line for famous installations. The reputation of Oman as if deliberately holding the country at a distance from mass tourism. There is no race for the number of millions of guests a year, there is no endless race for new super records. Instead, the country creates its unique look, where every visiting man does not feel superfluous or random. You will not rest here as in Dubai, and do not join the usual holiday of brands and international entertainment. But if you want to really come into contact with authenticity and feel like a part of a carefully preserved tradition, Oman will definitely surprise. And this is only the beginning of our big conversation about why the country does not provoke crowds of tourists, but prefers to be a mystery that needs to be disclosed step by step. Stereotypes and myths about Oman. When it comes to Oman, most acquaintances and random fellow travelers at the airport immediately recall a couple of stable stereotypes, which, like old luggage suitcases, have been drawn to this country for more than a decade. First, they say that Oman is an endless desert, where there is nothing besides sand at all. Then they will quickly add that there is probably too strict for foreigners, or that traveling without a turban is almost an impossible mission. It is interesting that such finites of thinking are characteristic not only for the inhabitants of Europe or Asia, but also for the Middle Eastern neighbors themselves. It is amazing how many people even in the next east believe that Oman is a closed country where permission is required for almost every step. Although you just have to come and go through several calm Muscat streets or remote villages, as these myths begin to crumble one after another. One of the most common myths: in the Oman there is a dangerous desert, where there is very little water, and therefore it is difficult to survive even for a short time. In fact, the local population has learned to cope with a harsh climate for centuries, and in cities and villages there is everything necessary for comfort. Moreover, the Oman's agrarian culture will present you with a surprise: green gardens grow in oases, where they give a generous crop of dates, grenades, and bananas, and it is here that you can feel the difference between the popular legend and reality. The next stereotype: tourists have nothing to do here. Believe me, such a phrase is most often pronounced by those who never went beyond their hotel or did not dare to walk around the market in the old city. At every step you will find curious details, talented craftsmen selling silver jewelry, or old spices that prepare unique mixtures for local cuisine. And for adventure lovers there will be peaks and valleys, where for the whole day you cannot meet a single other traveler. Another myth concerns culture and hospitality. Often I hear, the Omansk residents are too closed, they are wary of strangers. My experience is completely opposite. The first taxi driver in the Muscat treated me to fragrant coffee with cardamom and told stories about his hometown while we were driving past the old fortresses. In a fishing village, I was gladly invited to try a fresh catch, and the owner of the cafe even showed how weddings were celebrated in them. Here, sincere respect for foreigners is combined with a traditional desire to share the best. Moreover, if you are a little deeper, you will find out that the stereotype of closed appeared due to special respect for personal space. No one will be imposed, but will always help if you seek advice or help. Thanks to this, tourists feel not outsiders in Oman, but guests calm and confident. Remember one thing: a trip to Oman is the best opportunity to reconsider the established ideas and make sure that even the most classified countries have their own, only their inherent simplicity and comfort. In the following chapters, we will consider in detail how these myths affect formal procedures and is it worth it to be afraid going on the road. Visa and border control. One of the main reasons why travelers sometimes bypass Oman is a visa issue. Even the most experienced tourists love everything simple: flew in, set up a stamp, and is free. In the case of Oman, everything is not as clear, but not as difficult as many think. Let's analyze all the nuances. First, about the most popular option, an electronic visa. Most foreign citizens can apply for permission to enter the internet. Everything is done on the official portal where you need to fill out the questionnaire, download passport scans and photos. Usually everything takes no more than 5 days. About everything. For some nationalities, the deadlines are even less. Sometimes a visa is received in a couple of days. But even if you are from those countries who need a traditional visa, the process is quite understandable and transparent, no confusing requirements or procedures with endless documents. There is a category of travelers who are generally more lucky. They have a visa-free entry for up to 2 weeks. For example, if you are from several Arab or Asian countries, then it's enough to simply present a passport on the border. However, for most Europeans, Americans, Russians and many others, an electronic visa is still needed. Prices are also quite sane. For example, a one-time tourist visa for 10 days will cost cheaper than an analog in the neighboring countries of the Persian Gulf. If you want to study the country along and across, you can issue a visa for 1 month if necessary. It is easy to extend if you have an unsolved dream somewhere in the mountains or outside the city. On the border in Oman, they work very calmly. Muscat International Airport is one of the most modern in the region. The queues usually move quickly. Passport control is polite. You will check the documents, ask a couple of questions about the route where you plan to stop, can clarify the hotel reservation or ask to show the return ticket. Everything is clearly, there is no nervousness that you often experience in other countries, where tourists are very carefully inspected. From personal experience, the whole process took me no more than half an hour, although the plane flew along with several more flights. If you travel in transit, there are special visas for short periods. This is convenient for those who want to inspect the city for 1 or 2 nights during the transplant, and there are a lot of such stories among my friends. Border guards treat with understanding. If they see a sincere interest, they even say that it is definitely worth a couple of days. There is another pleasant nuance. If you are already in the UAE, Bahrain or Qatar, you can request the so-called combined visa, which operates at once for several countries. This gives flexibility to those who travel along the Persian Gulf. In general, the entry procedure is as transparent as possible and to match the idea of Omani calmly and without unnecessary stress. If everything is arranged in advance online, then there can be no unpleasant surprises. And if you still have questions, employees on the border surprise friendliness and patience. Thus, the first meeting with Oman already on the border leaves a good impression and prepares for a leisurely rest. Infrastructure, amenities for travelers. When it comes to the tourist infrastructure of Oman, there is immediately a desire to compare it with the usual favorites of the Middle Eastern region. But do not rush in advance to imagine endless rows of super cervicals or luxurious malls with aquariums throughout the wall. In Oman, everything is different, harmoniously, cabin, with a taste of unhurried oriental life, where a tourist is a guest, and not a business unit of stream. I'll start with placement. In Oman, you can find everything, from cozy guardsmen in old quarters to luxurious resort complexes by the sea. Most often, the hotels are small here. They are surrounded by gardens and palm trees, not a showcase of boutiques. Hotel staff is almost always friendly. They immediately offer Oman coffee and fresh dates, a small detail that immediately sets up a wave of hospitality. Family hotels are often proud of their own style. Somewhere there are covered courtyards with Arab mosaic, somewhere there are amazing terraces with a view of the mountains or ocean. Nature lovers choose eco-lodges in the mountains or desert campsites, where at night you can watch stars and listen to stories around the fire. If we talk about transport, Oman is proud of good roads. Even in the most distant corners you will find a high-quality coating and, unusual for the Arab world, markings with signs that are really clear to everyone. Between the cities, for example, between the Muscat and Salalah, regular bus communication has been established, modern buses, air conditioning works inside, there is a Wi-Fi. However, it is customary to move around the country on a rented car. The rental network is developed so that you can choose a suitable car in just one phone call. This gives the freedom of a real adventure. Stop at the canyon, turn into an ancient village or spend a couple of hours on a secluded beach, where no excursion bus will reach. In large cities, a taxi is quite working, and you can order a car through applications that are familiar to most tourists. In historical areas, for example, in the markets in the Old Muscat, it is easier to walk on foot, since the atmosphere of antiquity does not like unnecessary noise of transport. They respect cyclists and pedestrians here. The paths for walking are laid out not only in the capital, but also along the embankments of small coastal cities. With restaurants and cafes, the same story. There is no crazy variety of world network brands, but many pleasant authentic establishments. In every city there are at least a few cozy places where you can try the local cuisine and enjoy the very true atmosphere of the East. The delicious Finnish bread or freshly made fish is served without haste, as if inviting to enjoy every moment. One of the advantages of infrastructure for travelers, I would call the conditions as friendly as possible to the tourist in museums, on excursions, and even in collections of craft shops. Any employee is usually ready not only to tell about the traditions of the country, but also to tell you how to get to the right place or where to find the most unexpected lunch dish. Oman is not about mass tourism. Here they appreciate those who came not to check, but to discover new horizons without a crowd of outsiders in each photo. It is worthwhile to mention cleanliness separately. It is clean on the streets. The garbage is cleaned regularly even in the smallest towns. Here they value a reputation. The guest should be as convenient and pleasant as possible to be in the country. It is this restrained, but consistent concern for convenience that which distinguishes Oman's infrastructure from many other world directions. Here, a tourist is always surrounded by an atmosphere of calm and dimension, and even if you do not have enough of the usual bustle of megacities, it is this silence and smooth movement that allows you to see the real nature of the country. Prices: is Oman worth your money? The issue of value is always in the first place for those who choose a new country for travel. Many heard that Oman is one of the most unobvious articles on the card of the Persian Gulf, but how does everything actually develop here? Ready to say, if you understand in advance in prices, you can get a unique experience without painful surprises for the wallet. Let's start with the air. There are not so many direct flights from most capitals of the world to Oman beaches. Most often, travelers have to fly with a transplant, for example, through Dubai, Istanbul, or Dochu. The flight in the economy class there and back, even if it is with a transplant, usually costs no more than a standard ticket to popular resorts of the Middle East, and with a competent search you can grab good offers. Now, housing. Here you can find everything, from budget hostels and guest houses to luxurious 5-star hotels, where the evening is met by sunset over the Indian Ocean. Prices per night and simple, but cozy guards are quite democratic and rarely exceed the cost of a similar number in Europe. An average tourist can count on a calm and clean room for the amount that 3 stars usually spend on a typical hotel in Western Europe. Of course, exclusive resorts at the ocean or in the mountains are more expensive, but it is amazing how an individual service is appreciated here. Sometimes the owners themselves meet the guests, and breakfast is served on the terrace with a look that you want to take pictures endlessly. Food is another point that pleasantly pleases. In Oman, there is no tradition of overfeeding tourists with the brilliance of conceptual restaurants with sky-high price tags. Street food, fish markets, small family cafes, this is where the real taste of the country is revealed. Breakfast of fresh peat with hummus and strong coffee often costs less than European fast food. If you want to have dinner with a sea view and watch the fishermen return with the catch, get ready to pay a little more, but even then the account will rarely bring shock. It is especially pleasant that there are no obsessive tourist margins, the locals themselves eat the same money. About transport. The car rental is perhaps one of the most reasonable investments for a free trip to Oman. A middle-class car can be rented at a price comparable to Europe. The fuel here is much cheaper than in most countries of the world, which means that you can arrange real auto adventures without thinking about every extra kilometer. Buses and taxis will not hit the budget, and sometimes, having agreed with the locals, you can go to a group tour for a symbolic fee. Excursions and entertainment are far from always implying purchases or expenses. Many museums, mosques and natural attractions are available for free or for a very small fee. Even if you decide to take a local guide for going to the mountains, the price will seem modest against the background of the impressions that you will receive. As for the souvenirs, there is no sky-high prices for everything for visitors. Oman oils, spices, silver jewelry and traditional fabrics are sold in markets at honest prices, and sometimes the sellers themselves are inferior in a bargain from the heart, and not from the calculation for Navarre. In general, if you compare the vacation in Oman with a trip to Dubai, Dochu or Abu Dhabi, many are surprised to find that the final amount is often lower and the quality of impressions and the level of uniqueness are much higher. It is such an honest pricing policy, the lack of hidden payments and unique offers that make Oman not just worth their price, but a real find for those who dare to open a new route. Climate traps. When is it better to go? One of the most unexpected moments for any traveler who decided to travel to Oman is getting to know the climate of this unusual country. It would seem that the Persian Gulf is an eternal summer, salty heat and the sun all year round, but in reality everything is much more interesting and more complicated. It's easy to get confused in the local seasonal features even to an unclosed tropic lover, and if you arrive here for the first time at the wrong time, the memories may not remain the most rosy. Let's start with the most important. In Oman, there are only 2 clearly expressed seasons, wet and dry. The dry season lasts about mid-October to the beginning of April. At this time, the temperature rarely exceeds 30 degrees during the day, and at night it is pleasant fresh. That is why most travelers come to the country just in these months. Weather conditions are almost perfect for excursions, walks in the mountains, and even for long gastronomic evenings on the terraces by the sea. The humid season falls on the remaining 6 months, from April to October. It is this time that often becomes a real test for a tourist. The temperature on the plains can reach and even slightly exceed 40-5 degrees. Air humidity in the coastal areas, especially in the Muscat or Sur, increases so much that it seems that you are constantly in a warm bath. If you decide to go to the interior areas, for example, to the Bab Desert or to the region around the city of Nizhab, get ready for the heat, which literally takes out all the moisture from the air. Even a regular walk during this period can quickly turn into a feat. But Oman has an unusual climatic difference, the effect of monsoons, which does not come to the entire coast, but only to the south. Each year between June and September, Dhofar, where the famous city of Salalah is located, comes the so-called Harif, the time when wet winds fill the air with freshness, the fogs flow from the mountains, and the crystal-clean sea is replaced by a cool hazel and light haze. Locals call this second in the spring. The desert blossoms with a green carpet, waterfalls appear on the slopes, and, oddly enough, those who want to escape from the heat and see a completely different Oman rush here. At this time, thousands of travelers from all over the region come to Salalah to enjoy this tropical anomaly. There is another climatic nuance: strong winds in the off-season and rare, but sudden showers. In the highlands, for example, in Jabal Akhtar or Jabal Shams, even in the summer it can be really cool in the evenings, and in winter it can be almost frosty. That is why I advise you to always clarify the temperature in the selected region and take not only light clothes, but also a sweater or windbreaker for mountain adventures. Thus, the best period for traveling to Oman is from October to early April. This is a universal advice for those who want to see everything: ancient cities, beaches, mountains and desert, without turning every walk into a test for strength. And if you like unusual natural phenomena, do not miss the Harif in Dhofar. This is an opportunity to get into a real Oriental fairy tale away from the standard seasons of Barcelona or Bangkok. The climatic features of Oman add a twist to the journey. Somewhere they will throw a pleasant surprise, and somewhere they will become a real trap. The main thing here is not to rely on template phrases like "it's always hot in the Middle East," but to find out in advance about the time of the year in order to get a maximum of every day in the country that can surprise. Cultural features and traditions. Oman is not only a map on which deserts, mountains and ocean are indicated. This is, first of all, a country with a very special culture, where history and modernity are not just intertwined, but live side by side every day. The authenticity here is felt in everything: how they greet in the market, how they decorate houses, how they cook coffee, and how a stranger is met on the street. The first thing that catches your eye: respect. The Omansk residents are extremely polite and friendly. They will not annoyfully offer to buy a souvenir or draw a tourist into an annoying conversation. The unspoken rule acts here: everyone chooses himself when and with whom to communicate with. People traditionally welcome each other a slight bow of their heads and the phrase "Salam alaikum." Do not be surprised if even strangers will hold your hand or just wish a good day. For Oman, this is not a formality, but the norm of everyday life. Clothing is a special story. Most men wear long white or cream clothing, called the dissits, on their heads, a light scarf in different manner. Women, as a rule, put on elegant dresses and cover their head with a scarf. For tourists, a strict dress code is not required, but respect for local customs is very important. It is worth avoiding outright clothing, especially in public places and when visiting mosques. A simple long dress or pants with a shirt is your path to respect and smiles around. In Oman, it is not customary to show feelings in public. Leave hugs and kisses at home. Even holding hands on the street here is rather a rarity, especially for steam. This is due not so much with religion as with the inner sense of modesty that society permeates. Nevertheless, if you need help or advice, you will be listened to and try to explain everything in detail and friendly. Time and rhythm of life flow in a special way. Here they are in no hurry and in no hurry others. If you have agreed on the meeting, but the interlocutor is delayed, no one will be irritated. The Oman Sky believe that the haste deprives the soul of joy, and this principle is felt literally everywhere: in the bazaar, in a cafe, on the beach, even in business negotiations. A special role is played by traditional coffee, a rotor that is served with dates. He is a symbol of respect, and if you are offered a cup, they are considered impolite to refuse. Often, several cups will be offered the guest at once, and they will add a story about the clan, traditions, local news, or even invite you to visit a real home dinner to each. Separately, it is worth saying about the holidays. In Oman, both Muslim and national dates are celebrated. During Ramadan, almost all establishments are closed during the day. For a tourist, this is an opportunity to feel an atmosphere of general unity and peace of mind. And if you are in the country on the day of the national revival, you will definitely see folk processions, music, traditional dances with sabers and bright costumes. family and children occupy an honorable place. Children are treated here with great love, they are always in the spotlight, and for older family members, respect is absolute value. Remumity is often manifested even in small things when the elders lead the younger ones in the market or do a common family business, for example, preparing a festive treat. Finally, honesty is appreciated in Oman in trade, relationships, hospitality. If you have promised to do something, they will surely do it. This is probably why the traveler here quickly dissolves in local life and even begins to feel like not just a tourist, but a welcome guest. Having discovered such features, you will understand that the real value of Oman is not at all in monuments and beaches, but in every look, gesture, and cup of coffee. And, believe me, this experience will be remembered forever. Safety, myths and reality. When you are going to an unfamiliar country, one of the first questions, how safe is there? I honestly admit, before my first visit to Oman, I also studied reviews and ratings, listened to the advice of experienced travelers, compared with the situation in neighboring countries. I heard more than once that in Arab countries, tourists need to be especially careful, but in fact, reality turned out to be completely different. Oman is rightfully considered one of the safest countries in the Middle East. There is an extremely low crime rate, local and tourists calmly walk on the streets of cities until late at night, and foreigners often note that they never had to face small thefts or deception. For example, I repeatedly forgot a bag or phone in a cafe and always returned my things completely intact. This level of honesty is rare, especially if you compare with the promoted tourist directions. The most interesting thing is that the majority of the Omansa have been accustomed to respect someone else's property since childhood and help those who were in a difficult situation. If you get lost or get into an unforeseen situation, passers-by will not turn away, on the contrary, they will try to find a solution, even if you have to go to the other end of the city for this. My acquaintance tourist was lost in the airport, and the support service accompanied it until the suitcase was found, while everything happened without nerves and with a smile. There are practically no political demonstrations, mass protests, or other events that could interfere with rest. The police look strictly, but calmly, do not try to check everyone in a row. Their main task is to monitor the order, and not to arrange total control at every step. In the case of an emergency, it is enough to call the local rescue service number. The operator will quickly contact you in English and explain what to do next. Much attention is paid to the rules of the road, especially on high-speed tracks and in the mountains. High fines for speeding and dangerous driving are accepted here, but this makes roads safe for everyone. When I was traveling on a rented car on mountain serpentines, I often met patrols that control the movement, especially in places popular among tourists. That is why accidents are rare, and tourists are recommended to be careful not because of crime, but for their own safety on complex routes. An important point for travelers is medical care. Oman has a very developed healthcare system. Hospitals and pharmacies are in every large city and even in some villages. The medical staff in large clinics speaks English, and most often also several others. If necessary, you can get a consultation or even a call of a doctor with departure to the place. When I needed help with a scratch after a trip to the rocks, the local pharmacy not only quickly processed the wound, but also explained in detail how to care about health in the heat. It is also curious how the Oman is watching the calmness of foreign guests at the hospitality level. You will not be inspected at the airport without stopping, do not impose unnecessary checks, but they are always ready to help. Even if you travel alone or with children, you feel as protected as possible. It is not customary to look at a tourist as a stranger here. Here it is primarily a guest who will be prescribed any necessary support. As for natural dangers, the only serious risk is associated with heat, cross-terrain, and possible sandstorms in remote areas. Do you like outdoor activities? Then just specify the weather forecast in advance and take the water supply, a headdress, and sunscreen. The Omans themselves joke that their main danger is too strong the sun. Thus, from the point of view of Oman's security is one of the most complacency and calm countries. Here, the traveler can truly relax, not afraid for personal belongings or freedom of movement, and the smile and help of the locals is the main guideline on the way. The availability of information and promotion of the country. This is where real riddles begin. How often did you notice that you learn about some directions simply because it is on every second billboard, pops up in millionaire advertising or flashes on social networks? Oman is the exact opposite of this story. There really is not so much information about the country, and often it is scattered by various sources, from travel notes to random discussions on the forums. The first thing that catches your eye, Oman is practically not found in the top variant lists in large tourist publications. Even if you take guides in English, French, German or Spanish, you will most likely find only short sections about the country, a glimpse of the capital, a couple of famous fortresses and a couple of lines about a unique festival. Compare this with the abundance of information about Dubai or Turkey, and it immediately becomes clear why many simply do not know about how much Oman can offer. Online cards, applications, and large international reservation services seem to solve part of the problem. But often there are not enough detailed descriptions of excursions, events, and even reviews from the travelers themselves. In order to organize the first independent journey, I had to rummage from a dozen forums, read living blogs and turn to small travel agencies in the country itself, otherwise it was difficult to make a full-fledged picture. Oman is slowly but surely following the path of digitalization of tourism services. In large cities and on popular routes, modern information centers appear where you can get a card, find out the schedule of excursions and even subscribe to their notifications. But in many regions, only local residents or hotel staff will help you in the old-fashioned way, but such contact gives a chance to talk to find out a living story, and not a copy of the brochure. An important feature, promoted in the usual sense for us, is almost absent. There are no obsessive commercials on television, international marketing campaigns and global shows with the participation of stars. All that the country bets is the word of mouth and the real impressions of travelers. The Omans are cautious in high-profile statements and do not seek to flood newsfeeds with the promises of a paradise recreation. But everyone who has at least once visited here takes home a story that is shared with friends, sometimes even inspiring more for a trip than any advertising. For those who love social networks, I note, thousands of views are often gaining photos of Oman, but to find Russian-speaking, German or Spanish bloggers, which are in detail, step by step, the country's routes are often non-trivial. But if you lay a unique route, you have a chance to become a pioneer for your audience, and this is cool for both video blogger and an ordinary tourist. Another nuance is a language barrier in information materials. Most of the brochures and navigation within the country in Arabic and English, French and German are extremely rare. A tourist, accustomed to the information flow in Europe or Thailand, may at first feel lost. But you just have to ask the locals, and they will quickly find how to explain the most important, even if you do not have a common language. Goodwill is the main bridge in this sea of information emptiness. Actual programs, events and fresh discoveries most often do not appear online, but on the boards of ads in hotels and cafes. Therefore, I advise you to always be attentive to such hints. It is through them that you can find out about the festive fair, evening concerts or opening for the public a rare historical attraction. The availability of information about the Oman is a kind of test for the search seekers. But the country itself rewards those who are not too lazy to dig a little deeper. The journey turns into a personal discovery, and not just on the next trip on the must-see list of a booklet. Tourist attractions. At first glance, it may seem that there are not so many interesting things in Oman, because their miracles are not told on every corner, and the photo from the Muscat does not flash in a million traveler Instagrams. But one should only be here, as quickly becomes clear, the country is a real storehouse for lovers of unusual routes and discoveries. Here, every attraction is not just a checkbox in the list, but a separate story that's exciting and memorable. The starting point of almost every route becomes a Muscat. This city surprises with calm architecture, where, like a mosaic, it is combined by ancient Arab traditions and discreet modernity. The Great Mosque of the Sultan of Qaboos leaves a special impression, a grandiose structure, where the carpet on the floor is the size of a whole football field, and there is such silence inside that steps are heard as a light ringing. Nearby a noisy Mutra market, where between the shelves with spices, silver, and knitting dates you can get lost and not notice how it flies for several hours. Immediately the embankment is the place where the locals walk with families, and in the evenings the whole city becomes one big terrace for meetings and unhurried conversations. The second pearl of Oman is the forts. Just imagine, there are more than 1,000 in the country, and everyone stores his own, not like anything like a legend. One of the most famous is Fort Ba, which is included in the UNESCO Heritage List, and Fort Nizhab, who once defended the spices from the raids of the Bedouins. Thick walls, steep stairs, patrol towers, from here amazing views of valleys and mountain chains open. Each fort is a museum and excursion to the past at the same time. For those who dream of wild nature and exciting species, Oman gives many surprises. Mountains Jabal Shams and Jabal Abdar as if cut out of amber, with ancient terraces, along which goats walk a herd, and canyons who are not inferior in beauty to even the American Grand Canyon. Here they like to walk along the Oman's balcony, a picturesque path, where a new scale of the landscape opens behind each turn. And also mountain villages hidden from the hustle and bustle where you can stay in the traditional guesthouse and go out to the waterfall with the first roosters. Wahiba Desert is a separate story. Once among the golden velvets, you forget about the time, only dunes, only the wind and the bright sun. This is a place where Bedouins are still wandering and nights are illuminated by millions of stars. To spend at least one night in a tent here means to really feel the loneliness and beauty of the East. Oman is also rich in coastal miracles, the snow-white beaches of the Indian Ocean, along which herons roam, and bays with unusual turquoise water. One of the most impressive places is Wadi Shab and Wadi Bani Khalid, where mountain streams form transparent lakes, and the water is cool even at the peak of heat. A campaign here is a light walk, and swimming in the jungle in the middle of stone rocks. Fans of history will find real archaeological treasures in Oman. The towers and tombs of the Bronze Age, ancient oases with the irrigation system of the Falaj, which is included in the list of World Heritage. In the village of Misfat al-Abrin, it seems that time has stopped, terrace plantations, adobe houses, and the aroma of coffee from each door. Modern Oman also does not lag behind. Museums, art centers are being built here, music and theater festivals are held. The National Museum in Muscat is not just an exposition, but a complete immersion in the culture and traditions of the country. And it is also worth paying attention to the old palaces of the Sultan and small exhibition sites where children learn crafts, and adults conduct master classes in cooking and ceramics. Each attraction in Oman is a small adventure, where the main value is not external dispatchability, but the spirit of the real East. Here you feel like a pioneer, even if ancient caravans have already walked along these paths. Oman is not only beaches and deserts. Oman is often associated exclusively with sandy dunes and endless seashores, but in fact the country is much richer in its internal content. Those who allow themselves to go beyond standard tourist routes are quickly discovered, real pearls are hidden here, even experienced travelers are not guessed about the existence of. The mountains of Oman deserve special admiration. Jabal Akhtar and Jabal Shams are not just magnificent peaks, these are places where the air is transparent, the days are filled with aromas of needles and flowering gardens, and in the morning the sun rises so that its rays seem to be spilled in terraced plantations. In the spring, the slopes adorn the gardens of grenades and roses, real pink farms, where they collect petals for the famous Oman pink water. It is here that you can be on a traditional tea picnic with local families or observe how women squeeze juice from ripe grenades using ancient methods. In the depths of the country there are amazing oases. Wadi is picturesque valleys with fresh water, hidden from the scorching sun with giant palm trees and rocks. The most popular among such places are Wadi Bath Khalid and Wadi Shab. However, real magic begins where tourists rarely get, small gorges, where water goes along the ancient Faglach system, from which the locals fill the jugs and wash the finished groves. Having visited such a corner, you can hear stories about how the village has lived for decades thanks to one spring, and try sweet, just torn dates. The historical villages of Oman is an open-air museum. Misfat al-Abrin, Bilad site, Al-Hamra. You will not find stores with magnets in these settlements, but each house is decorated with traditional carvings, the walls are built of clay, and on the roofs are dried grass and spices. Walking along the local streets, it is easy to get lost for a couple of hours, drink tea with the mistress at the entrance or find out the technique of ancient forging from the artisan, who is helped by a son under the master. In the winter season, traditional jumps on camels and goats markets begin in Oman. It may seem to the tourist that this world has long left, but here it is alive and rich. In the process of trading, you can see how tribes compete for the best cattle, and children with excitement consider one coins. To visit such a fair means touching real life outside the glossy tourist facades. A pleasant surprise awaits those who are looking for an environmentally friendly rest. Oman's wilderness beckon not only silence, but also by biodiversity. Here pink flamingos nesting, on the coast of Bala Saret, sea turtles are laid, and unique species of birds are removed next to the ras stagnation. Some reserves are open to visitors, and early in the morning here you can meet naturalists from all over the world who want to observe nature in complete silence. For seekers of identity, the most important discovery is people. In the villages you can witness the holidays of the crop, weddings, or traditional dancing for drums. The Omansk residents are proud of their heritage and are always glad to the guest. They will tell you how to cook coffee with a cardamom, invite you to try a home dish, and teach you how to weave baskets from palm leaves. You understand that Oman is much more than just sands and waves. This is a country where history lives, where mountains store the aromas of flowering gardens, and Wadi, cool and peacefulness, where traditions are alive every morning and every evening, and where even the wildest places are full of unexpected discoveries for someone who was ready to open towards a real Oriental fairy tale. Activity: what to do in the country. Oman is an ideal country for those who do not just want to look at the sights outside the window of the bus, but seeks to engage in events, try themselves in something new and get experience from the category remembered for life. Here, almost everyone will find a lesson to their liking, from extreme adventures to complete relaxation in the bosom of nature and deepening into a leisurely life. Let's start with the most obvious, but far from boring, trekking in the mountains. Mining and desert routes are a separate adventure genre. Dozens of paths are laid on picturesque gorges and terraces. For beginners, there are light walks to waterfalls or farm villages, and experienced travelers are beckoning the famous routes along Jabal Shams, the highest peak of the country. The balcony trail over the canyon is delighted with everyone without exception, and the viewing platforms become ideal points for dawn. Often, local guides offer one-day campaigns, during which they treat coffee with a cardamom right on top. Wadi valleys with fresh water are terribly popular among fans of bathing and picnics. For example, Wadi Shab and Wadi Bani Khalid became favorite locations for entire families. Here you bathe in transparent natural pools, jump from the rocks, pickered in the shade of palm trees, and also examine grottos and small waterfalls. The impression is special, as if you are in the green world in the middle of stone deserts. Further, safari along the desert of Vibe. Departure on Suvzan marching, tea in the Bedouin camps and an overnight stay under an open, strewn with stars of the sky. This is not just an excursion, but a real ritual for the most romantic and curious. At dawn here they ride a sandboard, try how ancient tribes breed lights, and listen to the stories of nomads about life in the desert for centuries. For connoisseurs of marine adventures, a whole ocean opens, snorkeling and diving in the Gulf of Mascata, one of the most interesting on the coast of the Indian Ocean. Underwater, multicolored corals, sea turtles, sometimes you can see dolphins or even whales. For lovers of leisurely pleasures, walks on boatstow are regularly organized, which traditionally go to dawn or sunset. During the season, on the turtle beaches of Ras Al Jeans, they actually conduct night observer excursions to see how huge sea turtles go ashore to lay eggs. Those who wish to plunge deeper into the culture of the country can visit culinary masterclasses in the old Muscat quarters or try to weave baskets in local craft centers. There are often workshops where they are taught to make silver jewelry or paint ceramics, and even guests are offered to prepare a real Oman dinner with local women. In winter, festivals and fairs are especially popular in Oman. You can get to the races of camels, animated folklore shows or warm evenings in the mountains, when the entire village is gathering on an open area for dancing. Immediately you can master the ancient board games of Oman families or participate in a tea ceremony, where they will tell a lot of fairy tales and fuses. For those who like to photograph, there is a whole genre of phototourists. The guides know the points where amazing panoramas open at dawn, and at sunset the whole desert plays hundreds of shades of red and gold. On the coast there are excellent conditions for bird observation. Ornithologists from all over the world come here. And, of course, for the most unhurried guests, these are lazy days on the beaches, yoga on the sea breeze and long conversations with local residents over a cup of coffee. In Oman, they can rest in the broadest sense, and are always ready to share this skill with everyone who is ready to let new into their lives. Oman is a place where you always choose activity yourself. Today you are a researcher, tomorrow is a participant in an ancient holiday, the day after tomorrow is just enjoying the suction of the ocean. And it is this diversity that makes the rest here so personal and unique. Transport within the country, is it convenient to travel? When a trip around the country turns into a series of movements, a key question arises: how easy is it to get to the right place? In Oman, at first glance, everything looks simple, but under this external simplicity its own philosophy of movement is hidden, thoughtful, even unhurried. Here no one rushes anywhere, but at the same time you can get to any point, and, nice, with comfort. To begin with, public transport, as in the usual megacities, is poorly developed here. Yes, a bus network operates in the Muscat, the routes of which are most often served by new bus air conditioners. They go regularly enough, especially during the peak hours, but for a tourist it may not be easy to understand the schedule and routes. The signs are often written only in Arabic and English, and the stops themselves are not always equipped with maps or electronic displays. Therefore, most travelers prefer other options for movement. Renting a car is the most popular and logical choice. This gives complete freedom and routes, especially if your goal is to explore mountainous areas, deserts, or distant beaches. Roads in Oman are one of the best in the entire Middle East. The quality of the coating is excellent, the marking is clear, the pointers are noticeable and, importantly, read in English. Even in the mountains, where the roads wag between the rocks, almost all the main routes are paved. Thanks to this, many travelers are enough for a standard car, except that some desert areas or deep wadi cannot do without an SUV. Car rental points are in all large cities and airports. The car can be ordered in advance online, and upon arrival it will already wait for you in the parking lot. The prices are quite reasonable and are not very different from European ones. Gasoline in Oman remains one of the cheapest in the world. This is a significant advantage, especially if you are going to go far and a lot. For example, for the same money that in Europe will be enough for a trip in one direction, here you can ride in half the country. Intercity bus lines also exist, and they are used mainly by local ones. The most popular routes are from the Muscat to Salalu, Nizhab, Sukhar, or south towards the coast. Buses, as a rule, are quite spacious, with air conditioning and comfortable seats, but going to them is no longer about speed, but about the path. For example, a flight to Salalah can take more than 12 hours, but it will be possible to enjoy the landscapes that you did not even suspect in the roads and deserts. As for a taxi, in cities both traditional machines and applications, similar to popular international services. True, in some remote areas, especially in mountain villages or coastal villages, a taxi may not be available, and this should be thought about in advance. If you stopped at the hotel, feel free to ask at the reception, you will be happy to connect with a local driver or help you rent a car with a driver for a day. For movement in the internal areas, route taxis are also used, minivans, in which fellow travelers are simply planted. This is the most budgetary and authentic way of travel, but not always understandable to those who do not speak Arabic. But it is on such trips that friendly dating, exchange of treats, and even invitations to lunch in a village house most often happen. There is also air communication between the regions, although limited. For example, you can get to Salalah from a Mascout. This is the longest route inside the country. The planes are modern, the tickets are not expensive, and the flight itself takes about an hour and a half, which is several times faster than a similar bus or car. Particular attention deserves walking routes. In many historical and natural places, you can rent bicycles, ride along the embankment, or arrange hiking with a guide. For example, oral trails are popular in mountainous areas when the conductor tells legends and the history of the terrain right during the campaign. Thus, in Oman, your freedom of movement is a matter of choice. Want to plan and fix everything in advance, please? You prefer an intuitive route, or a local resident will pick you up by turning you, it's easy. The country does not interfere with moving, on the contrary, as if whispers, take a step and the road will open itself. Medical services and insurance. Traveling to a new country is always connected with surprises, and one of the first places in any list of worries is health. Especially if you go to the region with a hot climate, exotic cuisine, and remote territories. Oman, fortunately, refers to those countries where the healthcare system works stably, and the tourist can feel confident provided that he thought out several important nuances in advance. Let's start with the main one. The level of medical care in Oman is high. In cities and large settlements there are modern state and private clinics. The staff often studied abroad, so doctors and nurses speak English well, and sometimes in other languages. Especially in the private sector, where foreigners often turn. Here you will find both standard help, for example, with colds, allergies or burn, and more narrow profile treatment, including dentistry, dermatology, and even diagnosis. Another plus is accessibility. State clinics provide assistance to citizens according to the national medical insurance system, and tourists can count on a paid, but quite reasonable service in value. Private clinics are more expensive, but offer faster techniques, minimal expectation, and advanced services. For example, a specialist doctor will cost cheaper than in most countries in Europe or North America, and the quality will remain at the level. As for pharmacies, they are literally in every area. They work until late in the evening, and in large cities, around the clock. The drugs are mainly imported and certified, and in most cases you can find familiar international brands. True, sometimes drugs can be sold under other names, so it is better to know the active substance in advance if you have specific products that you accept regularly. However, despite the high level of medicine, it is not worth relying in case. It is very desirable to arrange medical insurance before the start of the trip. It is not obligatory for entering the country, but it is extremely desirable, especially if you are planning an active vacation, hiking, safari, trips in the mountains or diving. The insurance policy should cover not only primary assistance, but also possible evacuation, hospital, dentist services, and a trip home in case of serious injury or illness. He himself faced a situation when, during a campaign along the mountain paths, one of the group members dislocated an ankle. Literally 1 hour after the call to the clinic came to him, the equipment came to him, took him to the hospital, made an X-ray, offered treatment, and all this thanks to the presence of an insurance policy. Without insurance, expenses would be tangible, especially if you take into account the use of private ambulances and subsequent treatment. For those who travel with children, the convenience of the system is also visible immediately. The clinics provide pediatric departments, baby food, vaccinations, and even children's corners with entertainment so that the child is not afraid of a doctor. It is easy to use such services, just file a child's passport and say what is the problem. Even with minimal knowledge of English or Arabic, there are always people who are ready to help with translation. Some travelers prefer vaccinations before the trip as a rule. This is vaccination from hepatitis A and B, as well as standard preventive measures, such as updating protection against tetanus. Oman does not require vaccinations for entry, but reasonable insurance includes a doctor's consultation before leaving, and it is better to play it safe in advance. What is also worth noting, in hotels, large tourist complexes, and even Bedouin camps in the desert you can often find first aid. And tours and guides are almost always trained in basic medical skills. This is especially valuable if you plan a remote adventure, whether it be an overnight stay in the mountains, the path through the fjords in the south, or safari among velvins. Thus, Oman is a country with a strong and affordable medical system. But, as in any independent journey, the key to calm is preparation. Insurance, a basic set of drugs, knowledge of your features, and an attentive attitude to the body in the heat of the heat, all this will help you spend your rest without worries and focus on the main thing, enjoying every day in this beautiful and kind country. Language barrier and communication. Many tourists, especially those who do not feel confident in foreign languages, are afraid of one thing, that they will not understand. Oman is an Arabic country, and the Arabic language, to put it mildly, is not the easiest to study. But here is a paradox: despite the official sound and preserved traditions, in terms of communication, Oman surprises with its openness and ease in communication with guests. Even if you know only a couple of basic English words, do not worry, the journey here will be comfortable and understandable. Oman is a country with a deep history of trade. For hundreds of years, traders from India, East Africa, Persia, and Southeast Asia converged on its shores. Thanks to this, the Omans are historically used to communicating with a variety of foreigners. Today this is manifested in a wide knowledge of the English language, especially among young people, hotels, taxi drivers, guides, and even sellers in the markets. In large cities, such as Muscat, Salalah, or Sohar, English is often used at least than Arabic. Signs on the streets, signs, menu in restaurants, information booklets in museums, almost always duplicated in both languages. In hotels and tourist centers, staff, as a rule, speaks in good English. Even if the phrase sounds with an accent, you are highly likely to understand what you are offered or advised. But here there is a specificity. In remote areas and small villages, English can sound less often, and the local population, especially the older generation, mainly speaks only in Arabic. This is not a reason for anxiety. Omanski is one of the most patient and friendly peoples. If you are not understood the first time, you will not turn your back. On the contrary, they will try to explain on their fingers, show the road, they can even lead to the right place. This goodwill, together with the tone of communication, often speaks more words. I would like to pay special attention to gestures and non-verbal culture. In the Arab world, it is not customary to indicate a finger, and in Oman this is also considered disrespectful. It is better to use the whole palm or light gesture to the side. To show the soles of shoes, especially sitting opposite the interlocutor, is impolite. These subtleties of the cultural code will help not only to establish communication, but also to cause sincere sympathy. Tourists who have studied at least a couple of Arabic words often tell how it positively affects the contact. Simple salam alaikum instead of the cold hello causes smiles and sometimes even an invitation to tea. The words shukran, thanks, and afan, please/not at all, bring a sea of location. Omanski values sincerity. Even an attempt to pronounce something in Arabic is perceived with approval, even if it sounds with an accent. For more confident travelers, especially those who travel for a long time, a translator with a speech recognition function will be useful. In cities, you can also use the free Wi-Fi in a cafe, at gas stations and hotels. This will help to quickly find the right word, phrase, or direction. By the way, there are many expanses from India, Pakistan, the Philippines and East Africa countries in Oman. This means that in addition to Arabic and English, you will often find Urdu, Hindi and even a little French, especially in tourist services. Such a language mixture makes the atmosphere of communication even more international. Almost everyone you meet, at least a little speaks in English, whether it be a bus driver, a salesman in a market or a caretaker on a historical platform. If you plan to visit mosques or religious objects, the basic rules may come in handy. Men and women should be modestly dressed, and it is advisable for women to cover their hair. Where additional registration or instruction is needed, there are always personnel who will explain the actions in English or with the help of signs. Thus, the language barrier in Oman is much lower than it might seem at the start. A living, human communication reigns here, in which tone, friendliness and respect than ideal pronunciation are more important. And ultimately, it is human warmth that is the main language in which this amazing, warm country speaks. Features of national cuisine. It is really impossible to understand the culture of the country if you do not try its food. Oman's cuisine, like the country itself, unhurried, warm and multi-layer. Here, each meal is not just saturation, but part of the ancient ritual of hospitality, in which you are inevitably involved, even if you went into an ordinary street cafe. The nature of Oman's cuisine has been formed for centuries, absorbing the influence of India, Persia, East Africa and the Bedouin traditions of Arabia itself. The main ingredients are understandable and available: rice, meat, fish, spices, dates, honey, pink water aromas. Everything that is eaten here is simply in cooking, but surprisingly expressively to taste. Let's start with the main dish, shuva. This is a real gastronomic legend of Oman. It is prepared exclusively slowly. A kiss of a kid or lamb is marinated in a mixture of spices, garlic and lemon juice, wrapped in palm or banana leaves, buried in an underground furnace and extinguished for 2 or even 3 days. The process is accompanied by family gathering, stories, and is often timed to the holiday. Shuva tastes incredibly delicate, juicy, with the finest notes of spices, and literally melts in the mouth. You can try it either at the traditional celebration, or in some specialized restaurants, where the cooks follow ancient equipment. Another characteristic dish is makbus, also known as kusa. This is a dish based on long grain rice, covered with spices, saffron, cloves and cinnamon, with pieces of chicken, lamb or fish. It is served in huge bowls, designed for several people. They eat all together, with their hands, often sitting on the floor. This is an important part of not only everyday life, but also the philosophy of meals: equality, respect, communication. The fish also plays a major role in nutrition, especially in coastal regions. In the Muscat, Sura and Salalah, you can find an excellent samak mashvi, a fish baked on coals, usually served with a piquant tomato sauce. Its taste emphasizes the freshness of the catch and simplicity of technology. Here the fish is not filled with complex marinades, but fried with a minimum amount of ingredients to maintain a natural taste. Dates and honey are an individual gastronomic world of Oman. In almost any house you will be treated with fresh dates collected from the nearest plantation, and this is not just a treat, but a symbol of respect. Dozens of varieties of dates are sold in the markets, soft, dense, dried, with spices or in honey. Oman's honey is densely unsaturated, especially if it is assembled in mountainous areas where the bees feed on wild herbs. Of the drinks is the main character, of course, Oman's coffee, or clock. This is not a dark, strong espresso that you wait out of habit. Here, coffee is boiled on spices, cardamom, cloves, sometimes saffron. They drink it with small cups without sugar, drinking sips between sweet dates. This is an unofficial ritual that accompanies almost every meeting, in the house, in a shop, in the mountains, sometimes even in the middle of the desert. Oman's cuisine very respects spices, and not sharp, but fragrant. Classic seasoning, a mixture of coriander, turmeric, fennel, measles, gives the dishes a warm, slightly spicy taste. As a rule, everything is prepared in palm oil or melted fat, and in the mountains even on wood, giving the aroma a special smoke depth. As for the desserts, there is nowhere without sweets. One of the most popular treats is halva Omania, a thick dessert based on starch, sugar, saffron, and pink water. She is not eaten like in Europe, in large portions. Several teaspoons after tea or coffee are the perfect end of the meal. For a tourist, a pleasant discovery will be that the dishes in public catering places are generous in portion and are absolutely accessible. Even in a good restaurant, an account for 2 people often does not exceed a standard dinner in the European dining room. But the main thing is not the price and the size of the plate, but the very moment. In Oman, food is always a soul, and you are ready to share it with you. Submitted into Oman's cuisine, you will feel how tastes open the country from a new side. Everything is not about the show and culinary show-offs, but about warmth, sincerity, aroma of the house even if you are just a guest 1,000 kilometers from your own. Comparison: why do tourists choose competitors? Oman remains a real tourist mystery. Few people go there massively, despite the amazing nature, safety, and rich culture. And if we consider this phenomenon deeper, it becomes clear, the country has serious competitors who, thanks to competent marketing, powerful infrastructure, and well-thought-out promotion strategy, draw the attention of travelers from around the world. Why do tourists choose other directions? Let's start with the most obvious: United Arab Emirates. Dubai, Abu Dhabi is a symbol of luxury and comfort. There everything shines, pulsates, sparkles, and is built on a grand scale. The highest buildings, endless malls, islands created by human hands, thematic parks, exhibitions, concerts, rustling brands. The tourist is offered understandable and affordable experience. You arrive, sit in a taxi, fly on the attractions, and after 3 days you already have a photo album of thousands of pictures must see at least once in your life. Everything is predictable, but simple. For many, this is a plus. The second strong player is Qatar. Although he relatively recently began to actively promote himself in the tourism sector, the infrastructure developed at a shock pace to hold the World Cup. Qatar relies on cultural intellectuality, museums of modern architecture, futuristic hotels, festivals, symbiosis of the Arab tradition and digital future. He seduces the opportunity to plunge into the East without departing from the usual level of European service. The next competitor is Saudi Arabia. Yes, more recently it was an almost closed state, but now, thanks to the reforms within the framework of the 20-30 strategy, the country opens the door and generously invests in tourism. The guests are attracted by sanctuaries, historical objects, desert Martian landscapes, and large-scale national projects. Curiosity for a huge country, which has just begun to tell the world about itself, works like a magnet. Everyone wants to be first until the place has become a mainstream. Do not forget about Jordan, another very popular country in the Middle East. Her map of impressions is understandable and powerfully packed. Petra, the Dead Sea, the Wadi Rum Desert, one of the 7 wonders of the world, hot springs, religious routes. In addition, due to international support, Jordan built the image of an open, hospitable state with reliable logistics and a rich history. This is exactly what the mass tourist appreciates: predictability, informativeness, and advertised symbols. And now we compare with the Oman. There is no crazy advertising, there is no intrusive advancement, there are no superstars performing in the desert under the drones. Instead, the silence of the ancient mountains, the desert, where even the wind sounds different, and the old fortress with a 700-year carved door. Tourists who like spectacularity are most likely to choose closer what is bright, loud, and similar to the holiday. But there is another reason: the simplicity of communication. The usual tourism service has long been working in the rival countries: operator, transfer, Russian or international speech at every step, round-the-clock supermarkets, guides with a badge. This means that this direction is convenient, no barriers, everything is laid out on the shelves. In Oman, the journey is still the format of more discoveries, fewer rules. This is an option for those who are not scared by the route built on a hunch, with an overnight stay in a mountain village and a long road to a waterfall, which even Google did not know about. This is precisely the essence of the answer. Tourists choose other countries because they look simpler, brighter, more familiar. They have strong images, recognizable faces, powerful campaigns. Oman does not run for attention, he is waiting for those who will come to him. And often these are not those who just want to relax, but those who are looking for the present. Forecast: does Oman have a tourist future? When you look at Oman today, there is a feeling that the country seems to be at the intersection of times, where one path leads to the future with skyscrapers and streams of tourists, and the other towards the simple, sedate Eastern world, where the centuries-old architecture, unhurried life, and the smell of cardamom and coffee are more important than millions of likes on social networks. But will Oman remain away from the tourist boom? Is growth possible without loss of soul? And most importantly, is the country ready to accept the world with open arms? To begin with, the authorities of Oman are aware tourism is not just an opportunity to show the country to the world, but also a strategic tool for developing the economy. Today, oil and gas are the main resources of the economy, but the state, following the example of neighbors, is gradually moving to a model in which tourism becomes a supporting industry. In the latest strategic documents, up to 2040 years, tourism is mentioned among priority areas. The plans are impressive. More than 10 new hotel complexes in key regions are built: Salalah, Muscat, Nizhab, and the coast. Environmental resorts are created in protected natural areas to attract the attention of those who are looking for a stable, conscious rest. Increased attention is paid to the development of infrastructure, airports are modernized, new roads are being built, a network of public transport is expanding. Interest not only internal, more and more international hotel brands are included in the country's market. This suggests that global players already see the potential of Oman not just as an alternative route, but as a promising center for cultural and natural tourism. In recent years, festivals and initiatives began to appear that bring Oman to the stage of international attention. For example, the music festival in Salal collects artists and spectators from all over the region, and the Muscovite Culture Week opens ancient music, crafts, and theater for the general public. This forms not just interest, but a stable habit of returning. Those who come once are trying to open a new face of the country again and again. Great emphasis is on the development of unique experience. Oman positions himself as a place where you can not just relax, but find out, study, grow. Here, Arabic calligraphy lessons are possible under palm trees, participation in the collection of roses during the pink season in the mountains, culinary immersion with chefs, and rural practices for the manufacture of natural cosmetics. This approach follows the logic of modern tourism when the impression becomes more precious than the souvenir. But, perhaps, the most valuable is the desire of Oman to preserve herself with this growth. Unlike neighbors, the country does not seek to build the highest, largest, or most expensive. Oman creates an atmosphere, not an attraction. He does not compete in the number of skyscrapers, but focuses on authenticity, fortresses, bends of the streets, the breath of the desert. Even new hotels try to enter the element of tradition into the architecture. Buildings are being built in the spirit of old Arab aesthetics. There are calls. The lack of mass tourism is a plus from the point of view of solitude, but this is a minus for those who are used to a rich service, multitask logistics, and process automation. Oman has yet to find his golden mean between growth and maintenance of uniqueness. It is also worth considering climatic features and seasonality. The potential of tourism development is concentrated from October to April. This limits the annual influx, but at the same time creates a high season, which can be based on in terms of events, festivals, and stocks. In general, Oman has everything: nature, culture, safety, philosophy of life, which is attractive to a modern tired person. Will there be more tourists in Oman? Most likely, yes. But will they become massive? While the country is betting on another unconscious guests who are interested in history, ready to walk to the waterfall and sit on a carpet with a cup of coffee, and not on those who are looking for non-stop a selfie marathon. This is what attracts to Oman more and more those who are looking for present. This is where his tourist is built tomorrow. Not loud, but stable. Not screaming, but deep. Not for everyone, but for everyone who is looking for meaning abroad. Was it in vain? So we reached the final point of this wandering on the mysterious Oman, where not a fact is hidden behind each turn, but a feeling, not a tourist photo zone, but a discovery, not a stream of advertising, but a sincere gesture. The country that the mass tourist has not yet understood, but which everyone who has arrived at least once without unnecessary expectations. Just see how people live in the very corner where giant screens and multi-layer filters did not reach. So was it in vain that Oman remained outside the field of global tourist attention? Let's see on both sides. With one, yes, the country is definitely underestimated. For decades, the entire region has actively developed tourism, investing billions in megacities, artificial islands, tunnels of impressions and extravaganza of events from which it is breathtaking. And Oman at that time walked quietly, relying on his culture tightly, preserving traditions and refusing to participate in the race for the largest or most expensive. He did not publicly speak about himself, for which he ended up on the sidelines of mass interest. Because of this silence, tourists missed the opportunity to get acquainted with the other East, where it is not a stone and glass, but limestone and clay, not crowds in a shopping center, but a couple of old people discussing the price of spices, not a show under 1,000,000 lamps, but tea on the roof of the house with a view of the ocean. And this experience was missed precisely because few knew about it. From this point of view, yes, his silence cost him the attention of many travelers. But if you look from the other side, maybe this was the power of Oman? Maybe precisely because he was not concerned with the fever of super tourism, he retained the very authenticity, for which today thousands of people rush with suitcases, not where noise, but where they hear themselves. Maybe precisely because he did not build skyscrapers, his ancient villages with adobe walls remained intact. Precisely because he did not stab casino and water parks, non-triumphant beaches and pure water in Vadi were preserved. Precisely because he did not seek to catch up with modernity at full speed, the steps of the past are still heard in his streets, and in the local smiles, calmness that you can't buy for any money. Oman today is a rare example of a country that could, but did not want to be a fashionable background for a selfie, but chose to be a living space for a deep meeting, with a country, culture, tradition and herself. He did not push the tourists, he simply did not call them loudly. It was as if he was waiting for those who really want not to visit, but to live this experience from the inside, with respect and curiosity, without haste and without falsehood. Now that interest in him begins to grow, we can say with confidence, no, it was not for nothing that he was quiet. No wonder he was in no hurry. No wonder I waited. This finale is not a point. This is rather a comma. Because if you listened to this chapter, if you felt that it was not advertising between the lines, but respect, if at some point a desire to book a ticket was born, then you have already started your journey to Oman. Let it be mentally so far, albeit so far from the screen, but it has already begun. And it will definitely not be in vain. Do not forget about the useful services that we indicate in the fixed comments. Subscribe to the channel, like it. Good rest for everyone.